Story 1. I thought I knew my neighbor well. Mr. Henderson was a retired engineer in his late 60s, always cheerful and eager to lend a hand. He lived alone, his wife having passed away several years ago, and his children long since moved out. We shared pleasantries and occasional conversations about gardening or the weather, and he even helped me fix a leaking faucet once. I never imagined that behind his kind eyes and warm smile lurked a disturbing obsession. It all started on a Sunday afternoon. I was cleaning the living room when I noticed a small, unfamiliar device tucked behind a potted plant on the bookshelf. Curiosity turned to alarm as I picked it up and recognized it as a hidden camera. My heart raced. Why was there a camera in my home? Who could have put it there? I immediately called my friend Sarah, who had experience with security systems. She arrived within the hour, and after a thorough sweep, found 2 more cameras, one in the kitchen and another in the bedroom. The realization that someone had been watching me in my most private moments was chilling. My mind raced, trying to piece together how this invasion of privacy could have happened. My thoughts turned to Mr. Henderson, who had access to my home on several occasions to help with repairs. Could he be responsible? The idea seemed absurd, but I couldn't ignore the possibility. I decided to confront him. That evening I walked over to his house, my stomach in knots. Mr. Henderson answered the door with his usual warm smile. "Hello there. What brings you over?" he asked cheerfully. I took a deep breath. "Mr. Henderson, I found hidden cameras in my house. Do you know anything about them?" His expression faltered for a moment, a flicker of something unreadable crossing his face. Then he laughed nervously. "Cameras? In your house? That's absurd. Why would I know anything about that?" His denial only fueled my suspicion. "I don't know, Mr. Henderson, but you're the only person who has had access to my house recently. Please, if you know something, tell me." He sighed, his shoulders slumping. "All right, come inside. We should talk." Reluctantly, I followed him into his living room. He motioned for me to sit down while he fetched a box from his closet. He placed it on the coffee table and opened it, revealing a collection of electronic devices and tools. "I'm sorry," he began, his voice trembling. "I didn't mean any harm. After my wife died, I became very lonely. I started watching you because you reminded me of her. It became an obsession, and I know it was wrong." My anger and disgust surged. "You violated my privacy, Mr. Henderson. How could you do this?" Tears welled up in his eyes. I know. I got carried away. I just didn't know how to stop. Please forgive me." I stood up, shaking. "I can't forgive you, Mr. Henderson. You need help, and I need to call the police." He didn't resist as I dialed 911. The officers arrived swiftly, taking him into custody. They assured me that they would investigate thoroughly and that Mr. Henderson would face the consequences of his actions. In the following days, the police removed the cameras and collected evidence from Mr. Henderson's home. They found recordings spanning months, documenting my daily life in disturbing detail. The violation was more profound than I had imagined. The news of Mr. Henderson's arrest spread quickly through the neighborhood. People were shocked and sympathetic, offering their support. I installed a state-of-the-art security system, vowing never to feel so vulnerable again. One evening, as I sat alone in my living room, the weight of what had happened settled heavily on me. I felt a mix of anger, betrayal, and sadness. Mr. Henderson had been a trusted neighbor, a friend even, and he had shattered that trust irreparably. A knock on the door startled me. It was Sarah, holding a bottle of wine and a look of concern. "Thought you could use some company," she said softly. I managed a weak smile. "Thanks, Sarah. I could use that." We sat together, talking and sipping wine. She helped me process the ordeal, reminding me that it wasn't my fault and that I had taken the right steps by reporting Mr. Henderson. As the night grew late, Sarah left, and I felt a sense of cautious optimism. I would move forward, rebuild my sense of security, and learn to trust again. But I would always be more vigilant, knowing that sometimes the most unsuspecting people could harbor the darkest secrets. In the end, the experience taught me the importance of safeguarding my privacy and trusting my instincts. It was a harsh lesson, but one that made me stronger and more resilient. I knew that with time I would heal and reclaim my peace of mind. Story 2. I woke up to a text message from my own number, detailing my location and what I'd been doing the previous day. My heart pounded as I stared at the screen, reading and rereading the words that described my activities in unsettling detail. The message began, "Hey, I see you. Yesterday you were at the coffee shop at 9 a.m. wearing that blue jacket. Nice choice." The casual tone only made it more disturbing. I threw on some clothes, my mind racing as I tried to think of how this could be happening. Could it be a prank? Some new kind of scam? But who would go to such lengths, and how did they know so much about me? I decided to call my phone provider, hoping they could shed some light on the situation. "Good morning. How can I assist you today?" the customer service representative chirped. "Hi, I'm receiving text messages from my own number," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's really detailed, like someone is watching me. Is there any way my number could be hacked?" The representative paused. "That's very unusual. Let me check your account for any unusual activity." As I waited, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. My apartment suddenly felt claustrophobic. Every creak and rustle seemed magnified. I glanced at the windows, half expecting to see someone peering in. "Sir, there's no indication of a breach on our end," the representative said finally. "I recommend contacting the police if you feel threatened." "Oh, the police. I hadn't thought of that, but it seemed like the logical next step." I thanked the representative and hung up. Picking up my keys, I decided to head to the station. Maybe they could trace the source of the messages. On my way out, I received another text. "Heading to the police, huh? They won't be able to help you. Turn around." I stopped dead in my tracks, my blood running cold. Whoever this was, they were watching me in real time. Panic surged through me, and I dashed back into my apartment, locking the door behind me. I quickly closed the blinds and sank to the floor, trying to gather my thoughts. I needed to stay calm. Taking a deep breath, I decided to call my friend Lisa. She had always been level-headed and might have some advice. "Lisa, I need your help," I blurted out as soon as she picked up. "Oh, slow down. What's going on?" she asked. I explained everything, reading the text to her verbatim. There was a long pause on the other end. "This is seriously creepy," she said finally. "Are you sure no one has access to your phone or accounts?" "I don't think so. I mean, I live alone, and I haven't noticed anything missing or tampered with." "Okay, listen. I think you should still go to the police. I'll come with you. They might be able to track where the messages are coming from, and it's better if you're not alone." Her words brought a measure of comfort. "Thanks, Lisa. I'll wait for you here." While waiting for Lisa, I checked my phone settings, looking for any signs of tampering. There was nothing unusual. I felt helpless, trapped in my own home by an invisible stalker. I started to wonder if there were hidden cameras somewhere, but searching the apartment yielded nothing. Finally, Lisa arrived. Seeing a familiar face was a huge relief. Together, we made our way to the police station, constantly looking over our shoulders. At the station, we explained the situation to a sympathetic officer. He took my phone and promised to have their tech team look into it. "Until we know more, Try to stay somewhere safe, he advised. Maybe stay with a friend or family member. Lisa insisted I stay at her place, and I gratefully accepted. As we left the station, I received another text. Running to your friend's house won't save you. I showed Lisa the message. She frowned but stayed resolute. We'll figure this out. Let's get back to my place. That night at Lisa's, I barely slept. Every noise set me on edge. I kept my phone on silent, not wanting to see any more messages. In the morning, we returned to the police station. The officer greeted us with a grim expression. We traced the messages to a computer in your apartment. What I gasped. How is that possible? I've never seen any suspicious devices there. Hidden devices are becoming more sophisticated. We'll need to search your apartment thoroughly. I felt a strange mix of fear and relief. If they could find and remove whatever was being used, maybe this nightmare would end. Back at my apartment, the police swept every corner. Finally, they found a small, barely noticeable device hidden behind a vent. It had been capturing everything. You're lucky we found this, the officer said. We'll investigate further to find out who did this and why. As they left, I felt a wave of exhaustion. This ordeal had taken a toll on me, but at least there was hope it would be resolved. For now, I was safe, and I had the support of friends like Lisa. I decided to take one step at a time, focusing on regaining my peace of mind. Story 3. After a routine doctor's appointment, I received a call from the hospital saying they had mistakenly given me someone else's diagnosis, one with a chilling prognosis. I remember the moment vividly. The sun was setting, casting a warm golden hue over everything. I had just settled into my favorite chair with a cup of tea when my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen, recognizing the hospital's number, and answered with a mix of curiosity and mild concern. Hello, Mr. Carter? This is Dr. Martinez from Riverside Hospital, said a familiar voice on the other end. Good evening, Dr. Martinez. What's the matter, I asked, trying to keep my tone light. I need to apologize profusely, she began, and I felt a cold knot forming in my stomach. We've made a terrible mistake. Earlier today, we gave you a diagnosis meant for another patient. I froze, my mind racing through the possible implications. What kind of mistake, I managed to ask. There was a mix-up in the lab. You were mistakenly given the results of a patient with a terminal illness. I can't begin to express how sorry we are for the distress this may have caused you. A wave of relief washed over me, quickly followed by a pang of empathy for the unknown individual who had received my relatively clean bill of health. So I'm not dying, I asked, almost laughing at the absurdity of the situation. No, Mr. Carter. Your actual results are clear. You're perfectly healthy, Dr. Martinez assured me. I thanked her and ended the call, but the relief was quickly overshadowed by the thought of the person out there who had just had their life turned upside down. How were they coping? Did they have family to support them? The questions haunted me as I went through the motions of my evening routine. Sleep didn't come easily that night. I tossed and turned, my mind replaying the conversation over and over. I kept imagining the person's face when they received the devastating news meant for me. By morning, I had resolved to do something about it. I called the hospital back and asked to speak with Dr. Martinez. After a brief hold, she came on the line. Dr. Martinez, I'm very concerned about the other patient who received my diagnosis. Is there any way I can help, I asked, hoping I didn't sound as desperate as I felt. There was a pause on the other end. I appreciate your concern, Mr. Carter, but due to patient confidentiality, I can't disclose any information about them. I understand, but isn't there something I can do? Maybe leave a message of support or something, I persisted. She sighed softly. I can pass along a message through the proper channels, but that's all I can do. I'll make sure it reaches the patient." "Thank you," I said, feeling a small measure of satisfaction. "Please tell them they're not alone and that there are people out there who care about them, even if they don't know it." "I'll make sure they get your message," Dr. Martinez promised. Days passed, and life slowly returned to normal, though the incident lingered in the back of my mind. Then, about a week later, I received another unexpected call. "Mr. Carter, this is Sarah Thompson from Riverside Hospital. I'm calling on behalf of the patient who received your message," said a gentle voice. "Oh, hello," I replied, my heart skipping a beat. "How are they?" "They're doing as well as can be expected under the circumstances. They were deeply touched by your message and wanted to thank you personally," Sarah explained. "I'm glad to hear that. Is there anything more I can do for them?" I asked. "They mentioned that they would like to meet you, if you're comfortable with that," Sarah said. I hesitated, taken aback by the request. "Of course I'd be willing to meet them," I finally said. A meeting was arranged for the following week at a nearby park. I arrived early, nervous but determined. As I sat on a bench, I saw a woman approaching. She looked pale and fragile, but her eyes were bright with determination. "Mr. Carter?" she asked, her voice soft but steady. "Yes, that's me," I replied, standing up to greet her. "And you must be Emily," she said, shaking my hand. "Thank you for your message. It meant a lot to me." We sat and talked for hours. Emily shared her story, her fears, and her hopes. I listened, offering words of encouragement and support. It was a humbling experience, realizing how a simple mistake had connected our lives in such a profound way. As the sun set, we parted ways, but I knew this wasn't the end. Emily and I stayed in touch, and over time I became a part of her support system. Her strength and resilience inspired me, and our friendship grew deeper with each passing day. The hospital's mistake had initially filled me with dread, but it ultimately led to a connection that changed both our lives. In the end, it wasn't just about a misdiagnosis, it was about the power of compassion and the unexpected ways in which our paths can cross. Story 4. I discovered that the seemingly harmless handyman who had been fixing things around my house had a criminal record for stalking. It started innocuously enough. My kitchen sink was leaking, and a neighbor recommended Sam, a handyman who lived a few blocks away. She praised his work, saying he was reliable and affordable. I called Sam, and he came over the next day. He was an unassuming man in his late 40s, with a friendly demeanor and a worn-out toolbox. He chatted about the weather, his love for old cars, and his years in the neighborhood as he fixed the sink. There was nothing off-putting about him. Over the next few weeks, I called Sam several times for various small repairs: a broken fence, a clogged gutter, a squeaky door. He was always prompt, polite, and efficient. One evening, I was sitting on my porch, enjoying the cool breeze. I noticed a car parked down the street with its headlights off. It seemed out of place, but I didn't think much of it. As the night went on, the car remained there. Just as I was about to go inside, the car's headlights turned on, and it sped off. It was odd, but I shrugged it off as a random occurrence. The next day, while grocery shopping, I had an unsettling feeling that someone was watching me. I glanced around but saw no familiar faces. I chalked it up to my imagination. However, this feeling persisted over the next few days. I would catch glimpses of a shadowy figure in the corner of my eye, but when I turned to look, there was no one there. One afternoon, while sorting through old photos in my attic, I found a photo that made my heart skip a beat. It was taken at a neighborhood barbecue a few years back, and in the background, there was Sam staring directly at the camera. I didn't remember him being there, and the realization sent chills down my spine. I decided to do some digging. A quick internet search of his name didn't yield much, but a friend who worked at the local courthouse offered to help. What she found shocked me. Sam had a criminal record for stalking. Several women had filed restraining orders against him over the years. The charges ranged from following them home to standing outside their houses at odd hours. I was horrified. The man I had welcomed into my home, who had been fixing my leaks and mending my fences, had a dark past. I called the police to report my suspicions, and they advised me to stay vigilant and to call them if I noticed anything unusual. That night I was too unsettled to sleep. Every creak of the house made me jump. Around midnight I heard a soft tap on my bedroom window. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. The tapping continued, rhythmic and insistent. Gathering my courage, I peeked through the curtain. There, illuminated by the moonlight, was Sam, staring at me with an unnerving intensity. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. As I spoke to the dispatcher, Sam continued to tap on the window, a sinister smile spreading across his face. The police arrived within minutes, but by then Sam had disappeared into the night. The officers took my statement and patrolled the area, but they couldn't find him. They assured me they would keep an eye out and advised me to stay with a friend or family member for a few days. I decided to stay with my sister across town. The next morning, as I was packing, I noticed my front door was slightly ajar. Fear gripped me as I realized someone had been inside my house. I cautiously stepped inside and saw that my living room was in disarray. Drawers were open, and papers were scattered everywhere. Among the mess, I found a note you can't hide from me. I rushed to my sister's house and called the police again. They did a thorough sweep of my home but found no trace of Sam. The note was taken as evidence, and the police increased their patrols in my neighborhood. Days turned into weeks, and there was no sign of Sam. I lived in a state of constant anxiety, jumping at every shadow. The police kept me updated, but there were no new leads. I began to feel a sense of hopelessness, wondering if I would ever feel safe again. One afternoon, I received a call from the police. They had found Sam. He had been hiding in a neighboring town using a fake identity. He was arrested and charged with breaking and entering, stalking, and several other offenses. The relief was overwhelming. Knowing that Sam was behind bars allowed me to start reclaiming my sense of security. I changed the locks on my doors, installed security cameras, and took self-defense classes. The experience had left a mark on me, but it also taught me the importance of being vigilant and trusting my instincts. Looking back, I realized how easily someone could hide their true nature behind a friendly smile. Sam had seemed harmless, but beneath that facade lay a predator. The ordeal had been terrifying, but it had also made me stronger. I vowed never to let my guard down again, and to always be cautious about who I let into my life. Story 5. The night was cool and the moon hung high, casting an eerie glow over the deserted highway. I was driving back from a friend's house in a nearby town, the road stretching endlessly before me. The hum of the engine was the only sound, a comforting monotony that kept my mind from wandering too much into the darkness around me. I had been driving for about an hour when I saw an abandoned car on the side of the road, its hazard lights blinking like a beacon in the night. I slowed down. Curiosity piqued, and pulled over a few feet behind the car. It was an old sedan, its paint faded and chipped. The driver's door was ajar, swaying slightly in the gentle breeze. I turned off my engine and stepped out of my car, the crunch of gravel beneath my boots the only sound in the stillness. As I approached the sedan, I noticed a child's toy in the front seat, a small stuffed bear, its fur matted and worn. My heart sank at the sight, a feeling of unease settling over me. I peered into the car, scanning for any signs of the owner. The interior was empty, save for the toy and a piece of paper on the dashboard. I reached through the open door and picked up the note. The handwriting was scrawled and frantic, barely legible in the dim light. As I read the words, a chill ran down my spine. They took her. I had no choice. Find the truth beneath the old oak. My mind raced with questions. Who was her? Who took her? And what truth was I supposed to find? I looked around, the desolate road offering no answers. There was no sign of a struggle, no indication of where the car's occupants had gone. The message was my only clue. I took a deep breath, glancing back at my car. I had a flashlight in the trunk, a habit I had picked up from years of late-night drives. I retrieved it and shone the beam around the area, looking for any signs that might point me in the right direction. The only thing that stood out was an old, gnarled oak tree a short distance off the road, its twisted branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. The tree looked ancient, its trunk wide and knotted. It seemed like the kind of place that might hold secrets. With a sense of determination mixed with trepidation, I made my way toward it. The ground was uneven, and the flashlight's beam wavered as I walked, casting eerie shadows that danced around me. When I reached the tree, I circled it slowly, the beam of light illuminating the rough bark and gnarled roots. At the base of the tree, partially hidden by fallen leaves and dirt, I found a small, weathered box. My hands trembled as I brushed the debris away and pried it open. Inside the box was a collection of old photographs and letters, their edges yellowed with age. The photos depicted a young girl, no older than 6 or 7, smiling brightly at the camera. The letters were addressed to someone named Sarah, each one filled with love and affection. But as I read through them, the tone changed. The later letters spoke of fear and danger, warning Sarah to be careful and not to trust anyone. The last letter was the most chilling. It was dated just a few days ago and simply read, "They know. I'm sorry." A sudden rustling sound behind me made me jump, and I turned the flashlight toward the noise. A figure emerged from the darkness, a man with disheveled hair and wild eyes. He looked at me with a mixture of desperation and relief. "You found it," he said, his voice hoarse. "You found the truth." I stepped back, clutching the flashlight tightly. "Who are you? What happened here?" He took a deep breath, his shoulders sagging. "I'm Sarah's father. They took her because I got too close to the truth. They threatened me, told me to leave the car and run. I couldn't let them take her, but I couldn't fight them either. I left the message hoping someone would find it and help." My mind reeled with the gravity of his words. Who took her? Why? He shook his head. "I don't know who they are. I only know they're powerful, and they're after something big. I think it has to do with the land around here, something buried beneath it." A car approached in the distance, its headlights cutting through the darkness. The man's eyes widened with fear. "They're coming. We have to go, now." Without another word, I helped him to his feet, and we ran back to my car. As we drove away, the abandoned sedan and the old oak tree disappeared into the night behind us. The mystery of what lay beneath the land and who had taken Sarah remained unsolved, but one thing was clear: we were now entangled in a dangerous web of secrets and lies. As we sped down the highway, the man beside me clutching the box of letters and photographs, I knew our journey was just beginning. The truth was out there, hidden beneath layers of darkness, and we would stop at nothing to uncover it. Story 6. When I came back from vacation, I found my home had been invaded and set up with cameras that recorded everything I did for weeks. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut, leaving me breathless and filled with a creeping sense of violation that I couldn't shake. It all started when I returned home from a 2-week trip to the mountains, eager to sleep in my own bed and enjoy the comforts of home. As I unlocked the front door and stepped inside, something felt off. The air was stale, and there was a faint, unfamiliar smell. I brushed it off, attributing it to the house being closed up for so long. I tossed my bags aside and headed to the kitchen, craving a cold drink. That's when I noticed the first odd thing. My refrigerator was slightly ajar. I distinctly remembered closing it before leaving. I opened it wider and saw that nothing seemed out of place. Shaking my head, I chalked it up to my memory playing tricks on me. I closed the door and grabbed a bottle of water. As I walked through my house, a sense of unease grew. It felt like I was being watched. I shrugged it off as post-vacation paranoia and tried to relax. That night I had trouble sleeping, the feeling of eyes on me persisting even in the dark safety of my bedroom. The next morning I woke up groggy and disoriented. I went through my usual routine, hoping to shake off the lingering discomfort. I decided to work from home, still uneasy about the strange feeling. As I sat at my desk in the living room, I glanced around, my eyes catching on something unusual on the bookshelf. I walked over and examined the small, black device nestled between the books. My heart skipped a beat. It was a camera, meticulously hidden among my belongings. I felt a surge of panic and started searching the house, my hands trembling. One by one, I found more cameras cleverly concealed in the living room, kitchen, bedroom, and even the bathroom. Each discovery heightened my sense of dread. I called the police, my voice shaking as I explained the situation. They arrived quickly, and I showed them the cameras. They took the devices and promised to investigate. Meanwhile, they advised me to leave the house and stay with a friend or family member. I packed a bag and called my sister, explaining everything as I drove to her place. The following days were a blur of anxiety and sleepless nights. I couldn't stop thinking about the cameras and who might have put them there. The police investigation yielded little information. The cameras were standard models, easily purchased online, and the footage was stored on local SD cards. There were no fingerprints or other clues. Feeling helpless, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I went through the footage, hoping to find something the police might have missed. The recordings showed my daily routines, every mundane detail of my life captured from the moment I returned home. The invasion of privacy made my skin crawl. Then I saw something that made my blood run cold. On one of the recordings, taken a day before I found the cameras, a figure moved through my house. They were dressed in black, wearing a mask that concealed their face. They went room to room, adjusting the cameras and checking the footage. The way they moved suggested familiarity with my home, like they had been there many times before. I shared the new footage with the police, who promised to continue their investigation. But days turned into weeks with no new leads. I felt trapped in a nightmare, unable to return to my home and unable to find answers. One evening, as I sat in my sister's guest room, I received an anonymous email. The subject line read, "I see you." My heart raced as I opened it. The message was short and chilling. "You can't hide forever." I showed the email to the police, who traced it back to a public Wi-Fi network, another dead end. I felt like I was losing my mind, constantly looking over my shoulder, jumping at every shadow. Desperate for some sense of normalcy, I decided to stay with a friend in another city for a while. I needed distance from the haunting memories of my violated home. Slowly, I started to rebuild my sense of safety, but the fear never completely left me. Months passed, and the investigation stalled. The police had no suspects, and I had no answers. I eventually moved back into my house, installing my own security system and taking every precaution to ensure my privacy. But the feeling of being watched never truly disappeared. Every time I glanced at a camera or saw a shadow move, I was reminded of the violation I had endured. My home, once a sanctuary, had become a place of unease and fear. To this day, I don't know who invaded my home or why they did it. The cameras are gone, but the sense of vulnerability remains. I live with the knowledge that someone out there knows every intimate detail of my life, and that they could be watching me still. Story 7. I was in the middle of a quiet Saturday morning when the package arrived. The delivery man handed it over with a polite nod, and I barely gave it a second glance until I saw the return address. It was blank. Curiosity piqued. I tore open the package, expecting a belated birthday gift or some forgotten online order. Instead, I was greeted with a sight that made my blood run cold: a bloody shirt, crumpled and stained, with a note on top. The note was plain, scrawled in a hasty, almost frantic script. It simply read, "For Amanda," my name clear and stark against the white paper. My hands shook as I picked it up, the words blurring momentarily as panic set in. I had no idea who sent it or what it meant. My mind raced through a list of possibilities, but none made sense. Who would send me something so horrifying? I gingerly picked up the shirt, careful not to let the bloodstains touch me. It was a man's shirt, larger than any I owned, and definitely not something I recognized. The blood was dark, almost black in places, suggesting it was old. The sight of it made me nauseous, but I forced myself to look closer, hoping for any clue. My first instinct was to call the police, but then paranoia set in. What if this was some elaborate prank? Or worse, what if calling the authorities would make me a suspect in something I had no part in? I decided to start with someone I trusted, my best friend, Sarah. "Amanda, this is insane," Sarah said, her voice a mixture of concern and disbelief. We were sitting in my living room, the package laid out on the coffee table between us. "Are you sure you don't recognize the shirt?" "Positive," I replied, shaking my head. "I don't know who sent this or why. It's creepy, right?" "Creepy is an understatement," she muttered, leaning back in her chair. "Have you thought about calling the police?" "I have. But I'm scared, Sarah. What if they think I'm involved somehow?" She nodded, understanding my fear. "Okay, let's think this through. Do you have any enemies? Anyone who might want to scare you?" I laughed, though there was no humor in it. "No, I lead a boring life. I go to work, I come home, I hang out with you. That's about it." We sat in silence for a while, the weight of the situation pressing down on us. Finally, Sarah spoke up. "Maybe we should look for any clues. There has to be something here." We examined the shirt again, this time with a magnifying glass Sarah had brought over. We found nothing, no labels, no hidden messages, nothing to indicate where it came from. The note was equally unhelpful, just my name and nothing more. "Maybe the post office can tell us something," Sarah suggested. "They might know where it was sent from." The next day, I took the package to the post office, hoping for answers. The clerk was helpful but ultimately provided little information. The package had been dropped off at a remote location, with no surveillance cameras and no way to trace it back to the sender. Feeling defeated, I went home and tried to carry on with my day, but the package haunted me. That night I had trouble sleeping, every noise outside making me jump. I kept the bloody shirt and the note in a plastic bag hidden in my closet, unsure of what else to do. A week passed, and just as the fear started to fade, a second package arrived. This time it was a small box, and inside was a single Polaroid picture. It showed the same bloody shirt, but this time it was being worn by someone. The face was obscured, but the setting was eerily familiar, my backyard. Panic surged through me as I stared at the photo. Someone had been in my yard, close enough to take this picture, and I hadn't even noticed. I called Sarah immediately, my voice trembling as I explained. "Amanda, this has gone too far. You need to call the police, now," she urged. This time I didn't argue. The police arrived quickly and took both packages as evidence. They assured me they would investigate, but their questions only heightened my anxiety. Had I noticed anyone suspicious? Had I received any threats? The answer was always no. Days turned into weeks, and the investigation yielded no results. The packages stopped, but the fear remained. I installed security cameras and changed my locks, but the sense of safety I once had was gone. Every creak of the house, every shadow outside my window, sent my heart racing. Months later, I received a call from the police. They had found nothing conclusive, but they did have one lead, a partial fingerprint on the second package. It didn't match anyone in the system, but it was something. They advised me to stay vigilant and keep in touch. Life slowly returned to a semblance of normalcy, but I knew things would never be the same. The packages had stopped, but the mystery remained unsolved. I never found out who sent them or why, but I learned to live with the uncertainty. And every time I see a package on my doorstep, my heart skips a beat, a reminder of the terror that once invaded my life. Story 8. It was a typical Tuesday afternoon when I decided to visit my usual barber for a routine haircut. The shop was tucked away in a quiet corner of town, its familiar atmosphere comforting. Joe, my barber, greeted me with a warm smile as I walked in. "Hey, how's it going?" he asked, motioning me to the chair. "Good, just the usual trim," I replied, settling into the chair. As Joe worked his magic with the scissors, we chatted about mundane things: sports, the weather, and upcoming plans. The conversation was light, and I felt relaxed. 20 minutes later, I emerged with a fresh cut, feeling refreshed and ready to tackle the rest of the day. However, things took a strange turn that evening. As I was winding down, my phone buzzed with a new message. I glanced at the screen and saw an unknown number. Curious, I opened the message. "Nice haircut. It suits you well." A chill ran down my spine. I looked around my apartment, half expecting someone to be watching me through the windows. Shaking off the feeling, I replied, "Who is this?" No response came. I dismissed it as a wrong number or a prank and went to bed, trying not to dwell on it. The next morning, I woke up to another message from the same number. "Hope you enjoyed your coffee this morning." I froze. I had just finished my morning coffee, sitting on my balcony as I did every day. My heart raced as I quickly scanned the area but saw nothing unusual. How could this person know my routine? Throughout the day, the messages continued. They were eerily specific, mentioning details about my work, my friends, and even my plans for the weekend. Whoever was sending these messages knew an alarming amount about my personal life. "Did you enjoy lunch with Sarah today?" I stared at my phone in disbelief. I had met Sarah, a close friend, for lunch at a cafe we frequented. The conversation had been pleasant, but now it was tainted by this unsettling intrusion. I immediately called Sarah. "Hey, did you tell anyone about our lunch today?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "No, why? What's going on?" she replied, sounding concerned. "Just some weird messages I've been getting. It's probably nothing," I said, not wanting to worry her. That night, as I sat in my living room, my phone buzzed again. "You look good in blue." I was wearing a blue shirt. Panic set in. Someone was watching me, and they were close enough to see what I was wearing. I double-checked the locks on my doors and windows, ensuring everything was secure. I even pulled the curtains shut, hoping to block out any prying eyes. The messages continued for days, each one more personal and invasive than the last. I went to the police, but they could do little without knowing who was behind the messages. They advised me to change my number, but I hesitated, fearing that cutting off this line of communication might provoke the sender. One evening, as I sat in my darkened apartment, my phone buzzed with another message. "Do you think the police can protect you?" I felt a surge of anger and fear. This had to stop. I decided to confront Joe, my barber, the only new variable in my routine. Maybe he had seen something or someone unusual. The next day, I walked into Joe's shop, my heart pounding. He greeted me as usual, but I could barely manage a smile. "Joe, can I ask you something?" I began, trying to keep my voice steady. "Sure, what's up?" he replied, looking curious. "Have you noticed anyone strange around here lately? Someone who might be watching people who come into your shop?" Joe frowned, his brow furrowing in thought. "No, can't say I have. Everything seems pretty normal. Why do you ask?" I explained the messages, leaving out some of the more personal details. Joe listened attentively, his expression growing more serious. "That's creepy," he said. "I'll keep an eye out and let you know if I see anything suspicious." Days turned into weeks, and the messages became less frequent but more cryptic. "You can't hide forever." I felt trapped, constantly looking over my shoulder, unsure of who I could trust. Every stranger seemed like a potential threat, and my once comfortable routine was now a source of anxiety. One night, I received a final message that sent shivers down my spine. Goodbye. The messages stopped after that. The silence was almost as unnerving as the messages had been. I never found out who was behind them or how they knew so much about my life. The police investigation led nowhere, and I eventually changed my number, hoping to put the whole ordeal behind me. But the fear lingered. I moved to a new apartment, changed my routines, and distanced myself from familiar places. The sense of being watched never truly left me, a constant reminder of the unseen observer who had invaded my life. Story 9. It started with an innocuous phone call. I was lounging on my couch on a lazy Sunday afternoon, the TV murmuring in the background, when my phone buzzed. The caller ID displayed my bank's name, and I answered, assuming it was a routine check. The voice on the other end, calm and professional, informed me of unusual activity on my credit card. "Mr. Thompson, we've noticed some irregular transactions on your account. Could you confirm if you made these purchases?" the representative asked. My heart skipped a beat as I listened to the list of charges. Exotic vacations, high-end electronics, and luxury goods, none of which I had bought. I scrambled for my laptop and logged into my bank account, my stomach sinking as the extent of the damage became clear. Thousands of dollars had been siphoned off over the past few months. Someone had been living lavishly at my expense. "I didn't make any of these purchases," I stammered, panic creeping into my voice. The representative assured me they would freeze my account and begin an investigation. But as I hung up, a feeling of dread settled over me. This wasn't just about the money. Someone out there had access to my personal information, and that thought was far more unsettling. I spent the next few days on the phone with my bank and credit card company, filling out forms and providing evidence of my whereabouts during the fraudulent transactions. They assured me I wouldn't be liable for the charges, but it felt like a hollow victory. My sense of security had been shattered. Determined to get to the bottom of this, I began my own investigation. I pored over my credit card statements, meticulously noting the dates and locations of the fraudulent charges. A pattern emerged. The purchases were concentrated in a few specific areas, all of which were miles away from my hometown. I decided to visit one of these locations, a high-end electronics store in a neighboring city. When I arrived, I approached the manager and explained my situation. He was sympathetic and agreed to pull the security footage from the day of the transaction. We watched the grainy video together, and my heart pounded as I saw a man swipe what looked like my credit card and walk out with a brand new laptop. He was tall, with dark hair and a confident swagger, a stark contrast to my average build and reserved demeanor. "Do you recognize him?" the manager asked. I shook my head, frustration bubbling up. "No, but I'd like a copy of this footage. Maybe the police can identify him." The manager agreed, and I left the store with a USB drive containing the video. I headed straight to the local police station and filed a report. The officer who took my statement assured me they would look into it, but I could tell my case was just one of many on their plate. Days turned into weeks, and I heard nothing from the police. My frustration grew, but I refused to give up. I delved into online forums and communities dedicated to combating credit card fraud, seeking advice and sharing my story. One user suggested checking for skimmers at places I frequently visited: gas stations, ATMs, anywhere my card might have been cloned. I made a list of all the places I had used my card in the past few months and began my rounds. At a small gas station on the outskirts of town, I found my first clue. The card reader on the pump felt slightly loose, and upon closer inspection, I saw faint scratch marks around it. I notified the attendant and called the police, hoping this would lead to something concrete. Meanwhile, my own investigation continued. I visited another store where a fraudulent purchase had been made, this time a luxury clothing boutique. The manager, unlike the first, was uncooperative and refused to show me any footage. Frustrated but undeterred, I took a different approach. I started asking around, talking to employees and nearby shop owners. One clerk remembered a man fitting the description I had from the electronics store video. He had been a regular customer, always paying with a credit card and never showing any identification. Armed with this new information, I went back to the police, hoping it would spark renewed interest in my case. To my relief, they assigned a detective to investigate further. Detective Harris, a seasoned officer with a no-nonsense attitude, took my concerns seriously. Working together, we pieced together a profile of the fraudster. It became apparent that he was part of a larger ring, cloning cards and using them to fund a lavish lifestyle. Harris connected my case to several others, all sharing similar patterns of fraudulent activity. Weeks turned into months, and just as my hope began to wane, I received a call from Harris. "We've got him," she said, her voice triumphant. He tried to use another cloned card at an upscale restaurant, and we had officers waiting. The arrest was swift, and the man, a seasoned con artist with a history of fraud, confessed to his crimes. As I sat in the courtroom watching him being sentenced, a sense of closure washed over me. The financial losses were being reimbursed, but more importantly, the trail of deceit had been unraveled. Returning home, I reflected on the experience. It had been a long and arduous journey, but it taught me the value of persistence and the importance of vigilance. My sense of security had been shaken, but it had also been restored, stronger than before. Story 10. When I first created my online dating profile, I didn't think much of it. After all, it was the modern way to meet people, and I was curious about who I might find. The process was simple: upload a few photos, write a short bio, and swipe right on anyone who seemed interesting. Before long, I matched with a man named Alex. His profile was charming, he was well-traveled, had a great sense of humor, and shared many of my interests. We exchanged messages for a couple of weeks, and I quickly felt a connection. He seemed genuine and kind, and his witty banter always made me laugh. Eventually, we decided to meet in person. We chose a quaint coffee shop in a busy part of town for our first date, a public place that felt safe and comfortable. The date went well. Alex was just as engaging in person as he was online. We talked for hours, sharing stories and laughing over shared experiences. By the time we left the coffee shop, I was already looking forward to our next date. Over the next few weeks, Alex and I met several more times. Each date was better than the last, and I felt myself growing more attached to him. However, there were small things that began to bother me. He always seemed to know too much about me, even things I hadn't shared with him. When I asked him about it, he brushed it off, saying he must have just remembered from our conversations. One evening, as we were walking through a park, Alex mentioned a book one had been reading, a detail I was certain I hadn't shared with him. My unease grew, but I didn't want to seem paranoid. I told myself he was just being attentive. Then, things took a darker turn. One night, as I was leaving my apartment to meet a friend for dinner, I noticed a car parked across the street with its headlights off. It seemed out of place, but I brushed it off as a coincidence. However, the next morning, the same car was parked outside my building. When I left for work, it followed me for several blocks before turning off into another street. My heart pounded as I tried to rationalize it away. A few days later, I received a package at my doorstep. It was an expensive piece of jewelry I had admired online but hadn't purchased. There was no note, but I knew it was from Alex. I hadn't told him about the jewelry. Feeling a mix of confusion and fear, I decided to confront him. We met at a cafe, and I brought up the incidents. His demeanor shifted, and he became defensive, accusing me of being ungrateful for his attention. The conversation escalated, and he stormed out, leaving me feeling unnerved and unsafe. That night, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. As I sat in my living room, my phone buzzed with a notification. It was from a new app I hadn't installed. Opening it, I saw a series of photos of myself, taken from various places I had been in the last few weeks. There were pictures of me at the coffee shop, the park, and even outside my apartment. Panic surged through me as I realized the full extent of what was happening. Alex had been tracking me, taking photos without my knowledge, and sending me gifts to manipulate my feelings. I immediately called the police and reported everything, from the strange car to the unwanted gifts in the app with my photos. The officers took my report seriously and assured me they would investigate. They advised me to change my routines, avoid going out alone, and consider staying with a friend for a while. I followed their advice, staying with my best friend Lisa, who lived across town. For a few days, things seemed to calm down. I started to feel a bit more at ease, thinking maybe Alex had realized I was onto him and backed off. But one evening, as Lisa and I were having dinner, I received a text message from an unknown number. It was a photo of me, taken through the window of Lisa's apartment. Fear gripped me, and Lisa immediately called the police. They arrived quickly, combed the area, and found no sign of Alex. However, they did find a hidden camera outside Lisa's apartment, aimed directly at the window. The police intensified their efforts, and within a week they arrested Alex. They found evidence that he had been stalking me for months, hacking into my devices, and tracking my every move. He had a history of similar behavior with other women, none of whom had pressed charges out of fear. With Alex in custody, I began to rebuild my life. It took time, but I gradually felt safer and more secure. I learned to be more cautious about my online presence and more vigilant about my personal safety. The experience left me scarred, but it also made me stronger. My seemingly innocuous online dating profile had led me down a dark path, but I emerged with a deeper understanding of the dangers that can lurk behind charming profiles and engaging conversations. It was a hard lesson, but one I would never forget. Story 11. It was a rainy Saturday afternoon when I discovered the hidden compartment in my house. The weather outside was dreary, and I was in the middle of a deep spring cleaning, trying to find some old family photos I wanted to digitize. My house was filled with cluttered boxes of books, old trinkets, and forgotten memories stashed away in every nook and cranny. I had just finished clearing out an old closet in the hallway when I noticed something peculiar about the back wall. Behind a stack of old board games, there was a small, inconspicuous panel. It was slightly loose, as though it had been tampered with. My curiosity got the better of me, and I pried it open. Inside, I found a hidden compartment. My heart raced as I pulled out the contents. The compartment was filled with a stack of photographs, each one meticulously arranged in a neat pile. As I sifted through them, my blood ran cold. They were photographs of me and my family, pictures taken from various angles, some showing us in our home, others at parks or family gatherings. The photos were all candid, capturing moments that we had never realized were being watched. I sat down on the floor, feeling a wave of panic and disbelief. How could this happen? I glanced around my home, suddenly aware of every creak in the floorboards, every shadow that danced in the corners. My mind raced to piece together how this invasion of privacy could have occurred. The photographs ranged from harmless snapshots to unsettling images of us in vulnerable moments. There were pictures of my children playing in the backyard, of my spouse and me enjoying a quiet dinner, even photos of us asleep on the couch. It was as if someone had been lurking around our lives, documenting our every move. The most disturbing part was the realization that these photos were taken without our knowledge, possibly over a long period. Who could have done this? My neighbors, friends, or even someone who had access to our home. The sense of violation was overwhelming. I picked up my phone and dialed the police. They arrived within the hour, their expressions grave as they examined the hidden compartment and the stack of photographs. Detective Reynolds, a tall, no-nonsense woman with sharp eyes, took charge of the investigation. "We'll need to process these photographs as evidence," she said, "and we'll conduct a thorough investigation. This is a serious breach of privacy." I nodded, feeling a mixture of relief and anxiety. Detective Reynolds assured me that they would do everything possible to find the culprit, but as the days turned into weeks, the investigation seemed to stall. There were no clear leads or suspects, and the case grew colder by the day. In the meantime, I took steps to secure my home. I installed a comprehensive security system, including cameras around the perimeter and motion detectors. I also hired a locksmith to check for any potential breaches or hidden access points in my house. Despite these precautions, the sense of unease lingered. One evening, while going through the stack of photographs again, I noticed a pattern. Some of the photos had timestamps on the back, written in a faint, unfamiliar handwriting.